In this episode, I speak with Erin Claire Jones. She is a human design guide and leadership coach, and she is the human design teacher of human design professionals out there. So she really knows what she's talking about. If you're curious about human design, you're fairly surface level about it, like I was before we spoke, then this is such a powerful episode, especially if you're looking to understand yourself more, to really figure out why you're here, what's your purpose, why do you feel the way you feel, why do you do things the way you do them. In this episode, Erin shares a really cool story about where human design comes from. She shares why human design is so important and useful, and I must say, I have a whole new respect for human design after hearing her speak. She also shares where you can start with human design. We go through the different human design types and different elements of the chart so you can actually use this information and understand it for yourself. Now, there's a link in the show notes where you can go look up your personal human design chart so that as you listen to this episode, you'll be able to pick out the bits that relate to you. Okay, let's go to the show. Erin Claire, thank you so much for joining me on the Anxiety Reset podcast. It's such a pleasure to have you.
It's so good to be here. Thanks for having me.
And we've just been talking about how crazy it is. We could not be more opposite right now. You've just had a gigantic snowstorm. It's freezing cold where you are. It's boiling hot and humid where I am. I mean, it's nighttime for me. It's just the morning for you. How crazy.
Yeah. I'm so grateful we found a time to connect. I find that when people are on the other side of the world, we're always like, how are we going to do it? But we did it and we're here.
And here we are. And I have so many questions because human design is something I see it on social media. I'm super interested and intrigued by it. I love astrology. I find that really fun. But, and I know that I'm a manifesting generator. That's pretty much as I know. I do know some manifestors in my life, and I've got a general sense of what that means. We'll go into a bit of what those types are, those key types. I don't even know what the real name is for them. You'll know all of that lingo because you are the expert on human design. And I'm really excited to just explore what this could do for the lives of women experiencing high functioning anxiety, looking to understand themselves better and really get that clarity on who they are and what they're here to do in this world.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's an amazing system for so many reasons, but I think it really helps us understand how we operate best and tools that kind of work with that in so many beautiful ways.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's start with where on earth did human design come from?
Of course. So human design has been around since 1987. It's a very mystical story. The founder his name was Ra Uhuruhu. He's no longer alive, but basically he was walking home one night in Ibiza and had heard a voice. And the voice said, it's time to work. And so for basically 8 days and 8 nights, he channeled the system and he just received all this information. And then he spent the next 20 years building it out. And when he received it, it was very much that human design really draws from so many different ancient systems, from the I Ching, from the chakra system, Kabbalah, astrology, like all in kind of one system to give us a blueprint to how we operate at our best. But one thing I'll say, and mostly because I work with so many skeptics and I worked with so many teams, is that I really see human design as an amazing tool, not as a belief system. And so I would just say that, like, as wild as the origins are, I think what matters most to me is whether the system is helpful and not whether it's true. I have worked with like tens of thousands of people, and it's like the most accurate thing I've ever discovered. And I think, again, it's always just like, is it helpful? Is it useful? And so I would just remind anyone listening that if you're going to dig into your human design, like, take it if it feels supportive and let it go if it doesn't. I think that we always know ourselves best, but it really can be a beautiful tool to deepen that self-knowledge.
Yeah, beautiful. And look, I mean, I totally appreciate you sharing that for the skeptics that might be listening. For me, Erin, I mean, I'm an avid follower of like Abraham Hicks. I totally cool with the idea of channeled messages from energy entities out there and that wisdom that we have access to, but that's not everyone's comfort zone. And it's actually taken me years to really feel comfortable with those concepts in my logical mind. So yeah, beautiful explanation. Okay, well, how is human design important and how is it useful for us?
Yeah, so I think human design is important because and useful in that it's so specific. I think when I sit with people and look at their chart, I often am not telling them anything new. I'm just giving them a language for things they have always known to be true about themselves, but like never really believed. And so they're like, oh my God, is that true? Like, can I really be that? And so I think it just like is such a liberating and freeing system because it gives us such ultimate permission to build businesses, to parent, to partner in ways that genuinely feel good for us. And it reminds us that like we are all designed so, so differently. And the more we kind of honor that, the more flow we find. And so many of us have spent our lives trying to be everything that we're not. And I think human design really returns us to who we are. So that's why I feel like it's important as it really kind of like anchors us in exactly who it is we are and like helps us walk that path in every part of our life. I think it's useful in that it not only gives us all this juicy self-knowledge, it gives us so many practical tools. I think that, prior to human design, I explored a lot of different systems and I was given so much cool information, but I had no idea what to do with it. And I think human design gives us all this amazing information and then gives us strategies and tools to kind of use in our decision making and how we communicate and create opportunities and what to watch out for. And so I think that it like can be so immediately transformative because it really allows us to kind of put the information into action on a daily basis in every decision we make and every interaction we have. And so I think kind of the combination of the specificity and the practicality, I think has allowed human design to resonate with a much broader audience than I think I ever could have imagined.
Yeah, it sounds like, if I'm hearing you right, it's a tool to help us with clarity, self-acceptance, and ultimately also like validation. Like you're right that you're on the right track, or who these weird things about you are actually great for you.
Totally. And are your strengths. Yeah.
Ah, beautiful. I can so already see how that would be beneficial potentially working with anxiety. But would you like to expand a little more on where figuring out some key elements of navigating anxiety might be available to us through human design?
Yeah. I mean, I think human design, my experience with human design is that like it's often when we're young, when we're kids, we're expressing it so purely. And then kind of as we get older, we kind of talk ourselves out of these ways of being. And then like we discover human design and we return to it. And so I think like discovering human design, I think can help somebody know like, I guess it depends on where the anxiety is coming from. It can like help them know how they best make decisions. So if there's like been any indecisiveness or challenge around that, it can help drop that into their knowing. It also helps people realize where they're the most sensitive and the most vulnerable to be taken off track. And I find that those areas can create a lot of anxiety, a lot of overwhelm. And I think really understanding our sensitivities and how to practically work with them is so empowering, And so I think that like, I mean, so many pieces of human design I think could be supported, but I think those two are probably the most impactful at the beginning of just like really helping us understand our decision making, but also understanding what energy we're taking in from the world around us and how to kind of navigate that in a way that is actually sustainable for us.
I would say when I'm working with clients, the biggest questions that come up with anxiety is like, is this normal? Is there something wrong with me?
Totally.
Like, and to have something that can tell us, yes, for you, this is
So
normal.
normal. Yeah.
Right. That's so powerful and helpful. So
Yeah.
let's talk about the human design types. I think
Yeah.
there's four of them. Is that right?
4 or 5, depending on who you're talking to, but four main ones, but there's a bit of a nuance. So I usually say 5.
Okay. Oh my gosh, I'm curious what the fifth one is, but would you mind giving like a little overview? I'm sure you could go on for ages just about this topic
Yeah,
of basically just a broad idea of what those types are.
of course. So high level, there are manifesting generators, projectors, reflectors, and manifestors. So in terms of the four, some people group the manifesting generators and generators into one. Um, and so manifesting generators are really here to be kind of the doers, the ones that have tremendous energy to kind of build, create, and make things happen when you're so lit up and excited by what you're doing. And so a big lesson for all these people is really prioritizing their own satisfaction and excitement and not seeing that as selfish, but as like the most important thing you can do. Also very important for these people to have very strong boundaries of kind of what they say yes to and no to, because their energy is very precious, and to kind of not say yes just to please others or because somebody else wants something. I would say manifesting generators, specifically like you, tend to be quite multi-passionate. often like moving their energy between many different things, aren't really meant to stick to one linear path. And then generators are kind of more about mastery, often diving deep into one thing and then the next. And I would say with both of these types, they're really meant to let things come to them and wait for something to kind of spark their gut before they go after it. So you're not really meant to chase or initiate or force, but wait for a thing to show up in your world and let you up. So before I move on to the other three, I'm just curious how that resonates or does not resonate with you.
Well, it brought to mind, I was recently filling out some information to help a student who's filling out an assignment for like a business. And she was asking me if I would give my insights. And one of the questions was, what do you do to run your business? And I was like, everything. I've written a book. I have time with clients. I study further things. I'm doing, podcasts. I'm creating content. I'm filming videos. I'm taking photos, like doing so much. So that resonates, multi-passionate and doing lots of things, but also equally, yes, my energy is precious. I'm not lit up every single moment, but when I am, that energy carries me through like unbelievably.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so it's waiting for that moment, I think because like when you actually feel lit up, like you'll be able to do things so much more powerfully and quickly than like had you been like, I'm just going to force it. And I love what you shared because I think for manifesting generators, especially, it's so important to keep their days really interesting, like lots of different things that keep you excited instead of kind of having the same rote activities day after day.
See, and I've had my moments, Erin, where I've thought, like, should I have more structure and more routine? Like every week is totally different, but there you go. It's perfect for me.
Totally. And it probably just keeps you really engaged. So the other types, there are projectors. Projectors are really here to be leaders, guides, advisors, teachers, not here to do all the doing. Their energy can really ebb and flow. So building space and rest and ease into their days is quite important. These people often tend to be very innately sensitive to other people and their energy. So they often make great coaches, guides, therapists, teachers, and they're really here to be invited in. And so they can see a lot of things and might want to share all the things that they see. But often when they're invited in to share and somebody's genuinely ready for their guidance and perspective, that's when they can have the most impact. Then we've got manifestors. I think you said you have some manifestor friends. They're really here to be very disruptive, innovative forces, really good at kind of like getting things started, getting the ball rolling, not doing all the doing to keep the thing alive, but often kind of getting it off the ground. And they're just like here to kind of provoke and like bring really new and different ways of doing things into the world. And often they thrive when they feel ultimate freedom and autonomy and control. These are not people that are here to be told what to do or guided or managed in any way. And they're really here to kind of initiate and make the first move and kind of like walk the path before anyone else does. Do you recognize that in your friends that are manifestors?
Totally. One of my best friends is a manifestor and she is totally walking that path. And it can create a lot of, uncertainty, a lot of like fear being that trailblazer, but ultimately she's also incredibly inspiring and great at all the things that she does and knows. And yeah, she's
Yeah.
awesome.
But it does, I love that. It sounds like you love her so much. And I think it does just require that courage to be the first. And so I think having a friend like you that just like sees that and inspires that and like emboldens her to do it even more. Because I think manifestors is so important to be surrounded by people that just like see how powerful they are and like want to kind of lift that up and remind them of how impactful they are as well.
Yeah. And then she'll sometimes see me doing. And, it's like, I've got to remind her, but this is your way. And she reminds herself too, like, you don't need to do it the same way that I do it because we've got different ways of being.
Exactly. And like in terms of the doing, like for manifestors, their energy is very spurty. Like they could have a day or days or hours or weeks where they make so much happen so quickly. And then days, weeks, and hour where they really are pulling back in their own energy. And so like it's not about consistency. It's about like honoring the inspiration when it's there and then kind of taking rest and allowing the next idea to come through.
Which is so interesting because our society just doesn't really celebrate or facilitate productivity in those kind of ways. We don't let it just unfold and flow and explode in bursts. We just expect the same thing every day, productive every day.
Isn't that wild? I know. And like none of us are really meant to be the same every day. And so it is, I think human design really reminds us of like how to use our energy in a way that's really effective. And so often it's not what has been like promoted as like the way to work. you know? So, and again, there are ways to do it. Like we don't all have to be entrepreneurs, you know, there are ways to kind of navigate these ways of working in whatever job you have, but it is definitely not the same thing every day. The final type is the reflector. Reflectors are the most rare. They're 1% of the population. And we're all really rare. I'll just say like all of our designs are so unique, but just type wise. And reflectors really are our collective mirrors, people that are deeply sensitive to their physical space and always kind of taking in and magnifying the energy that they're around. And so you get a really good sense of like how a team is doing or a company, just by how that reflector is showing up, because they're kind of amplifying that energy. And so it's so important for them to be so ruthless about who and where they're spending time with and in, because they're taking it all in so deeply. And they just see and sense things that most people don't. And so we call them evaluators just because they're always kind of observing and can offer such objective wisdom on what's happening and where things are going. And then the last piece that I would share is that reflectors are so inherently fluid. They will have days where they feel like a manifesting generator, like a generator, like a projector. And so their job is, again, not to be consistent, not to show up in the same way each day, but to honor whatever feels like them that day. And there might be a little bit more of like a monthly pattern for them, but to really kind of not force themselves to kind of fit into a box that isn't theirs.
So what would you say, Erin, this world is most, or society is set up to celebrate out of the human design types the most in the way that it is now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say probably generators. One is the majority generators and manifesting generators. I don't think it's really set up to serve manifesting generators, though, the kind of multi-passionate nature as much. But I will say it's like it's set up to serve generators, but also like not optimally, you know, because we have so generators are like they have the most precious energy to kind of build, create, and make things happen. But like it's like we said, when they're really lit up by what they're doing, but we have so many generators that are not, you know, not satisfied by what they're doing, and that causes so much frustration, and they don't have all that powerful energy that is meant to be available to them. So I think it's most set up because those are people that like can have the capacity to go and do when they're lit up by what they're doing. But I think the challenge is they often haven't been taught to prioritize that.
And what's your type, Erin?
I'm a projector.
You're a projector, which makes
Yeah.
sense as you are a teacher, you teach human design, and you teach human design teachers how to get better and support them in their work as well.
Yeah. And that's been a really fun transition to make. But yeah, I mean, when I first got into human design in 2015, like it was such a fringe thing, you know, and it was so not a popular thing. And so like it's been, and I was just like, is anyone ever going to care? But it's been so amazing to really watch it grow, and now to be able to support more people and sharing it with the world, because it's been growing so beautifully. And like I said, in ways that I never could have imagined.
Yeah, I would say it's something that a lot of people have heard of, at least the term human design, if not familiar with at least those broad types as well.
Totally.
How did you find it?
I found it very serendipitously. I was at a friend's gathering in New York City where I was living in 2015, and basically sat next to a stranger, and he asked if he could read my human design chart. I had never heard of human design, and I don't think anyone I really knew had. But I was like, okay, tell me everything. I love readings about myself, you know, and he gave me a little reading, and it was just the most like accurate, insightful thing I'd ever heard. And he actually ended that conversation. I think that had he not said this, I probably would have been like, cool, you know, and like walked on. But like he ended the conversation by saying like, Erin, I think you're meant to do this. And I think that like, I think we're meant to do it together. He'd been studying human design for a decade by then. And so it was such a crazy invitation, and my design is so much about being invited. And again, human design is not predictive. He just really observed, I think, a lot of compatibility in our designs, but also that like, I could have a knack for doing this if I really resonated with the system. So he was my first teacher. And we built, I went to Bali soon after that. And Bali was great because people had heard about human design in a way that they hadn't in New York. But I think that we built a business together for 2 years. And then in early 2018, late 2017, I started my own practice.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
What a cool story. And yes, you're right. In Bali, where I am right now, you can literally, the first thing you'll ask someone is, you know, what's your star sign, your sun sign, your moon, and your rising? And then what's your human design? It's very, very commonplace. Like, what do you do for work?
Exactly. Totally. I'm
Oh,
reminded that I'm like, oh, right, this is like where I am, you know, so it's fun. It's fun to watch it kind of take hold in other places too.
Totally. But for those who are not necessarily hanging out in Bali or having those conversations, who might be more new to the idea of human design, maybe this is the first time they're even hearing about it on this podcast episode. When you look up your chart, and there is a link to do that through your link tree on your Instagram, which is awesome, your website, basically. We'll have that linked in the show notes for everyone to go check out their human design chart. But you look it up and it's like this crazy map of numbers and lines and arrows. And I've looked at it before, and I'm a pretty curious person. As I mentioned, I'm interested and intrigued by astrology, and I can kind of see the natal chart a little bit, but oh my gosh, this is a whole other thing. Where do we start with human design, Erin?
I know. It's so people will look it up and then they're just like, oh my God, what am I supposed to do with that? And then they'll close the window. So it's not an intuitive looking chart. I think when you look at the chart, you realize how complex it is. But it's not going to be a thing where you look at it and you're like, oh, I understand now. So I would say that don't worry about the chart right now. I think what I would recommend starting with is looking at your type, your strategy, and your authority. Know that there are so many more pieces below that, but those pieces by themselves can be so transformative. So the type is the piece we just talked about in terms of how to use your energy best, then there's the strategy, which is how to create aligned opportunities. And then there's the authority, which is how to make the best decisions for you. And so like, for example, for you are not really designed to make decisions in the moment. You've got a very powerful gut feeling. It's probably talking to you all the time, but you're really meant to kind of sleep on things and give yourself a beat and not make decisions at an emotional high or low, because it's often like when things settle, there's like, and it's talking about like anxiety. It's like, if you rush into things, there can be such a sense of uncertainty and intensity and anxiety that kind of comes with you in that decision. But if you really sleep on things and feel into things, there's often such a sense of calmness and clarity that comes with you in decisions. Does that resonate before I keep going?
100%. I always need to sleep on decisions, particularly big ones and big financial investments as well.
Exactly. So type, strategy, and authority is where I would start. So how you use your energy, how you create opportunities, and how you make decisions. Again, 1 bajillion things underneath that, but a good starting point.
I would say even on a more lighthearted level, when I'm like shopping, looking for clothes, I don't like to purchase straight away unless I really know.
So true.
Like this necklace I found the other day, and I just saw it and I was like, oh my gosh, I need it. It's the wings of Isis, and it meant something to me. So there was a feeling of like, this is right and I'll act on it now. But most of the time for me, I need to walk out of the shop and I need to think about it. And I'm like, I can always come back, because
totally,
it's that sense of, if I'm going to make that decision, I want to really feel good about it.
Yeah, it's such a great example. I think that I hear the shopping one a lot for these people, where it's like they'll buy things and then the next day they're like, I don't want this, And so like, it's just like a big lesson. And I have a similar way of making decisions as you, of just like in the emotional intensity, like letting that dissipate, letting all the nervousness subside, and just like being like, am I still excited? And it's not about postponing things indefinitely, but just giving yourself a day or two. So that's where I would start. And then also like what I mentioned before, around where we're the most sensitive. There are areas called our undefined centers, the white shapes in our design. And that's basically where we kind of take in other people's energy, whether it's their stress, their fears, their emotions, how they feel about their work. And so really understanding those is so important, because they can take us so off track, but they also are areas of like such immense learning and wisdom once we really kind of learn what they are.
So those who would describe themselves as empaths, taking on or sensitive to others' energy, would that element show up in their chart?
It would, but they're also like, we're all sensitive in really different ways. So yes, there's an emotional center. So if somebody has that undefined, they like are likely going to like take in and amplify other people's feelings within their own body. So if somebody's feeling a thing and they're like, oh my God, I'm feeling it at like 200%. It doesn't mean if you don't have that you can't be an empath. You might just have a more natural boundary between what's yours and what's not. But yes, that does show up in the chart.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. And then what's next after that?
So other pieces that are really interesting to look at, there's something called the profile, which can really help us know how to align with our purpose, and kind of how to walk a path that feels really good. So for example, you're 6'2", and there's a lot to say about that, but I would just say like a couple of key pieces to give people context. One is that you're really meant to lean into the things that come very easily and naturally to you. like the things where you're like, they just like, it's so innate to who you are. Like, I think what comes easily and naturally is often exactly where you're meant to put your energy. And often people like don't give themselves permission to lean into that. It's like, I have to explain it. I have to do this thing, but it's like, no, this is just what feels right. And also you're really here to be a role model and a teacher. But you're kind of coming in for you, you're meant to just like keep embodying your wisdom in deeper and deeper ways. And you're meant to hit your prime when you turn 50. And that is not at all about waiting until then. It's more that it just like keeps deepening with time, and you kind of inspire authenticity in others by just being yourself so fully. And that just kind of like hits a beautiful peak when you're like later in life.
Oh, Erin, that's so cool to know I meant to hit my prime at 50,
It's cool,
especially
right?
growing up.
Yeah.
Look, society has stuff around aging, but to have like a kind of, that's such a powerful reframe just already in my mind. I'm like, wow, 50? Like I thought I was starting to,
Totally.
getting into the 30s now. I was like, am I going to start heading downhill soon?
No, it's so much, it's so much to look forward to, you know. I think that like I have the same profile, and it's just I remember discovering human design when I was 25, and I was just like, I want to hit it now. And then I'm just like, what am I talking about? Like it's just like it just keeps deepening, and like every phase has its own magic. But and I experienced it. I've worked with a lot of clients that are in their 50s with this, and you just feel it. There's such a gravity to their presence, you know. And so I do think it's a really powerful reframe. So the profile is really useful. There's also something called these areas called our channels. And those are areas that reveal our innate strengths. And so those are really cool as well, because then you're just like, are able to lean into them even more. Like, for example, one of yours is the strength of creativity. And it basically just means that you are really here to feel so creatively expressed in your life, whether it's like how you post on Instagram, whether it's what you wear, whether it's how you run your business. Like you were just here to do things in a very kind of unique, bold, and really different way. And when you're really self-expressed and really honor that, you inspire others to kind of really be bold in their own way as well. And so feeling like just creatively express, whether it's through your work or not, is so important for your well-being.
Oh, that's lovely. And I often feel so grateful to have the opportunity to creatively express myself in my work, which is so nice. And all of this stuff, so validating.
Yeah. And again, those are just things where you're like, oh yeah, that is a strength of mine. Like it's not everyone has that, and I can just really lean into that.
Yeah.
Um, so again, they're like, and I can go deeper into any of those things. I would say that's where I would start with those pieces. But there's basically one bajillion things underneath that as well.
I bet, because this is the thing. I mean, people say this, and I keep relating it to astrology. I'm sorry. I hope that's not
Oh,
like
it's fine.
offensive to the complexity of
No,
human design or anything, but it's just one I'm more familiar with, and I feel maybe people in the general public are more familiar with as well than human design.
of course.
People often say like, how can every human personality fit into 12 signs? That doesn't make sense, that we're like you're Libra or you're Taurus or you're Scorpio. And I always think, well, this is why we have all the different elements beneath that then we've got
Exactly.
a crossover of your Venus sign, your Jupiter, your moon, your rising. It all creates the complex human beneath. And I can only imagine, I mean, well, of course, I can see that it's the same thing with human design. There's so many complex layers, but I feel even more so with human design. It is like
Yeah,
like, did you like mathematics at school and science to understand this chart, Erin?
I know. I did love math. I think that like, you know, it's interesting. Like it is so complex, and I forget that. And it's been so fun. You know, I taught my first almost 200 students last year to kind of become readers, and I'm now teaching another cohort now. And it was so fun to kind of go back to the beginning and just be like, wow, these are all things that are so like built into me now. But to have to explain them is a whole different ball game, you know, because I've just been doing it for a while. So I will say it definitely took a lot of time, but like something about human design just made sense to my brain, you know? And like in the same way where I look at a natal chart and I'm like, what in the world is this thing? Whereas like astrology just like makes sense to some people. You obviously have to study it and then understand it, but like human design just like it fit in my brain in a way that no other system has. So, and I find a lot of readers that I know have had a similar experience, but yeah, it's crazy, but it does make sense. Like there is some kind of like coherence logically to it where it's like, okay, all these pieces, like now I'm kind of understanding the whole picture, but it really is it's a crazy thing. And it's an amazing thing. And I think again, that just reminds us, like you said, with astrology too, it's like, there's just such specificity. You know,
Yeah.
I think I've sat with so many skeptical clients that are like, I really don't want to believe this, but like everything you're saying, like I feel like you have had to be like reading my journal to really know that. So like I just like I need to know everything you see because I just like don't understand how it's all so accurate.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was obviously just so meant to be for you in so many ways. Just the fact that it comes so naturally. Perhaps you've done this before in some level in a past life. Who knows? There's always those theories and things like that there too. The other part of the human design, oh, is chart the right word? The
Yes.
table that comes out of it is the environment part. I'm
Hmm.
always like, ooh, why does this person have mountains and this person has, valleys? Like, what does this mean? I think mine is markets, which I'm
It
like,
is Marcus.
I'm happiest at markets. I love going to the beach. What is this?
So, there's a whole, if you look at your chart, you'll see that there are 4 arrows kind of around the top, and there's a whole world underneath those arrows. I took a 3-year course literally just on those arrows.
Oh my
It's a really, I know, and it's information that's really hard to access because it's like more advanced. And I would just say that it's never the first piece I'd recommend diving into, but once you've been experimenting with your design for a while, it's really powerful. But there's a lot of misunderstanding because like our environment in human design is pretty symbolic. It's like you don't need to live in a market or live in a kitchen, it's more just kind of characteristics of a space. So like some examples of spaces, like if somebody has caves as their environment, it's not about living in a cave, of course. It's about thriving with kind of cozy, safe, protected spaces that they can really retreat to. That could be in their car, that could be a room where they close the door, that could be sitting in a booth at a restaurant, sitting on the edge. Like it's just kind of like having some predictability in your spaces. Markets is really about kind of being in places where like things are happening and things are being exchanged, like it could be online, it could be offline, but it's also about like really being friends with people that you work with and really kind of having those you work with kind of become some of your closest relationships. But it's just like nice to be parts of things where like exchange is happening and there are things kind of building.
I see this resonating in two ways. One is that through the Instagram world, I've built a number of relationships and friendships, which is so exciting to have people who are like colleagues and kind of in the same world as me. So that sounds similar, right? In a way, Instagram
Totally.
is a market, like
Of
it's a
course.
marketplace of people doing things and talking about exciting stuff. The other way is I've always found myself happiest working, even if I'm like concentrating and trying to write something in a cafe, more so than at
Mm,
home by myself.
hmm. Yeah, totally. And there's also another piece of your design, and this comes from a piece called definition. Again, you guys are probably understanding that there are a lot of pieces here, which speaks how you guys kind of process things. And so for you, there's something around like if you're ever feeling stuck, being around other people's energy is so activating for you, whether or not you're talking to them. Like you going to a cafe, putting headphones on, and like actually being unavailable to others, like you're still kind of getting all that activation in really beautiful ways.
Seriously, that is very much true.
Yeah. And then just a few other examples of environments. There are mountains, like you said, and that's often people that thrive with like some elevation, like kind of having perspective, being on a higher floor, like seeing things from like with perspective and having a view. So it'd be like living on the second floor, or like kind of there are people with kitchens, and kitchens is not about living in a kitchen. It's about really kind of thriving similar to markets in a way, like really kind of being in like very buzzy creative spaces where things are just like transforming around you. It could be like holding court in a kitchen. It could be like at a co-working space, at a creative space. There's shores, but the shores is not even around like the beach. Like that's one example, but it's about being on the edge, like being on a space, like in an area where one space becomes another. It's like the city to the suburb, like the beach to like the beach to kind of the city, whatever it is. It's like where the tension of a different kind of space nearby. I often find these people like love porches, kind of love those in betweens. They love sitting at the edge of a restaurant and kind of like not in the middle.
Oh, interesting. This is so fascinating. Like that's
Such
really
a rabbit hole. Yeah.
really opened up my mind as to some of those choices, particularly for me. In Australia, we were like locked down for 2 years almost straight and lots
Yeah.
of like time alone. And I was finding at the end of that time, like I was just craving community and being
Yeah.
around people. So off I went traveling and, being in co-working spaces and being in cafes. And it just lights something up in me that I was okay during the lockdown stuff, but it's another level of thriving for me.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I love that example, and it just like it brings out so many new things in you.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so what does it mean when we are living our human design? Can we ever like fully get in there, Erin, and like have it all perfect? Like we are fully aligned in the design.
You know, it's a good question. I think that like human design really reveals our operating system, you know, and how we flow best. So I would say when we're living in alignment with it, things tend to flow. And not that they're easy, it's just like that we're on the most aligned path for us. Um, when we are out of alignment or like not living our design, we tend to experience a lot more resistance. So like the goal is not like nailing your human design, but it's more like honoring your unique way of operating and how you parent, if you're a parent, and how you build your business and how you work in company, whatever it is, like it's just like showing up in a way that uniquely works for you. And so I would say, as somebody that's been experimenting since 2015, I'm not like, I have nailed it, I am the best, but it's more that like I am so aware of all the areas where I can get taken off track that when it does happen, which it does, I can like much more easily kind of pull back into alignment. And so I really see human design as an awareness system. And so I think the more it kind of like builds into our awareness, the more we're able to kind of navigate life with a lot more grace because we're really clear on like when we're experiencing resistance and why. And I have, and I know we'll talk about offerings at the end, but one of my offerings is kind of a book all about your unique design. It's called the Blueprint Book. And I have so many clients that like, when they're off track, they'll like read it and be like, oh, I see why, you know, or they'll read it every morning to kind of keep themselves in alignment. So I think that like, it becomes easier with time, but like human design is very much a lifelong journey. And also one thing I would add is that like, the more self-aware you are, you're living in it without needing to know your human design. Like I think at some point human design will become like totally unnecessary. You know, I just think it's a lot of us aren't giving ourselves that permission because hearing you talk, like you're already operating that in that multi-passionate way as a manifesting generator. Like you didn't need human design to tell you that, you knew that, you know? So I think that's true. Like when we know ourselves, like we're just living it. And I work with so many people in their 60s, 70s, 80s that are just like, oh yeah, I've done it, you know? So I think it can be really validating in that way.
I suppose it's just like a language puts you know, letters and words to a meaning we're trying to communicate. Human design will put a system to our lives and the story and journey of our lives.
Exactly, exactly. And just gives us a language and kind of tools to step even more into more permission to kind of be ourselves in that journey.
Because as we're talking about this, there's a part of me that's very curious about actually going and having a session and going and
Totally.
diving into what it all means. But I equally know that doing that, there'll be the odd little surprise or cool thing there, but mostly it will be that confirmation of, oh, yeah, I'm doing it right, or I know that, or that's really cool that that's in my chart, or that you're saying that to me because I do feel that that's true for me.
Totally. Exactly. Yeah. And so I think it can just like serve as a reminder. And it can be both. You know, I would say when I discovered my human design, like it was very validating and but also very confronting because when I was discovered it, I was not living my design. Like I was trying so hard to like be a generator and just be everything but a projector. And so I think that like it really was such an amazing tool and kind of pulling me into alignment. And so it can be both ways. Like it can be very validating and very confronting and often a bit of both.
You know, it's funny, the times I've been the most distressed in my life, I would say, apart from specific, I would say the most like those long drawn out periods of being distressed, not just like, oh, I've lost someone I love and I'm going through a period of grief and this is challenging. It's like really feeling a lower vibration through a period of weeks or months is when I'm not living that authenticity to me and I'm kind of put myself in a box and yeah, maybe trying to show
Yeah,
up as purely a generator, not the manifesting part, such
totally.
as I used to think, you know, like through my 20s, I should be working a 9 to 5, like I should be working Monday to Friday and this is what it's meant to be. And gosh, like there's so many different ways that we can show up and we can work, and thankfully our system society I feel is moving more in that more and more in that direction of flexibility.
Yeah.
Work from home becoming a much more flexible thing for people a lot of the time, being able to, you know, have that sense of more balance or hopefully working in flow. And the whole other piece that I often talk to women about that's interesting, I'm interested in how that flows with human design, but it's women working with our cycles too, you know, our
Hmm.
hormone fluctuations, which is so important. But no doubt a generator perhaps might be able to push through that luteal phase, that pre-period like slump, more than maybe some other human designs. Would you say that could
Hmm.
be true?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably really great for all of us to honor that, you know? I think that we're able to kind of be so much more effective when we do it. But yeah, I think that like for generators, for example, like what allows them to sleep well at night is to feel like they've fully expended their energy during the day. And
Mhm.
honestly, in satisfying ways. And that could be they worked 9 hours. That could be that they like saw a friend that really lit them up and used up all their energy in the best way, you know? So I think as long as so I feel like on those days, like what requires expending their energy might require a lot less, you know? But I will just say that like for projectors, for example, manifestors and reflectors, like all of us are very vulnerable to like not knowing when to stop. We can just keep going and going and going. So we might actually have even more of a tendency in those moments to be like, I'm just going to push through it. And I think a big lesson for all of us, those three types especially, is that like rest is a really important part of the process. And yeah, so I think that like those are kind of the differences I see. But for projectors, reflectors, and manifestors, they often don't need to expend their energy each day to feel satisfied because that energy can ebb and flow.
So, in terms of the types that may be a little more prone to, say, burnout or
Yeah.
really just like driving themselves into the ground, it's not so likely to be the generators, even though they're the powerhouse action takers.
I would say that like the projectors, manifestors, and reflectors are so vulnerable just because again they don't have a break. Like they just like they're kind of they just are like I'm gonna keep going and going and going. And so that's why there's such a lesson in like energy ebbs and flows, rest serves a purpose, you know, honor that. I would say for generators and manifesting generators, like where burnout can come is a little bit different. It's just like when they are really overcommitting and basically like committing their energy to things they don't actually enjoy.
Yeah.
You know, because I think for generators and manifesting generators, as you've probably experienced, when you are lit up by what you're doing, one, you have more energy to kind of power through things. And two, you like light up the room around you. You give everyone energy. Whereas if you don't do that, like your battery will drain so, so quickly. And then there's like kind of a sluggish energy that you project, you know? And so like that burnout can happen from there.
Yeah, I experienced a bit of that after writing like the bulk of my manuscript for my book last year. And then once I'd done that and that project was done, I was so excited about it. And then it was like, oh, like what am I excited about next? And there wasn't something other than just like waiting for the process of the book and the editing to kind of go through. So it was like I really did experience that slump and that sense of
Yes.
not really being inspired, which was so interesting and makes so much sense as you explain that.
Yeah. And also again, it's like there are so many nuances in your design. Like even though you're a manifesting generator, like the whole energy of your design is very, and this is based on your channels, is very pulsating, which basically means that there are like periods of your life where there's like such momentum, such inspiration, such excitement, everything is happening. And
Mhm.
then periods where it feels like nothing's happening, you know? And those periods are often just like you internally recalibrating, preparing for the next burst and leap, you know? And so it's like that, like really allowing those kind of just like big seasons of your life to like ebb and flow and to not have consistent momentum all the time.
Yeah, you are totally seeing into my soul with all of
Yeah.
that. So I'm sure people say that to you all the time as well. So if someone is, say, feeling like they're a bit lost or a bit stuck, and maybe they can go look up their chart, where could they look? And is there some kind of insight that could potentially give them some clarity of where to move forward?
Yeah, I think definitely go look up your chart. You can do that at humandesignblueprint.com. Honestly, just start with your type, you know? And like I share a ton on Instagram at Erin Claire Jones, also at Human Design Blueprint. There are lots of posts about types. So just like going and being like, okay, what is like self-love for each type? What is like a dream job for each type? Just like kind of like starting to read stuff and seeing how it feels. Because again, I think even just the type could be so kind of revolutionary in that way. And then I would say if you're going to dig into one more piece, like just in this moment, I would check out that authority piece of how you best make decisions. Um, because again, you might be somebody that talks things out, that is in your gut response in the moment, sleeping on things, whatever it is. And so really kind of just connecting those two pieces and seeing whether you're really how they feel to you, how you feel hearing them.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's great advice. And so in terms of regulating the nervous system or calming us down or processing emotions, are there variations of better ways to do that depending on our design that is available for us to understand better?
Yeah, it is so dependent on our design. So I think that like if we're going to talk about emotions specifically, you know, there are some of us that really kind of project out and impact the world with our emotions, and some of us that kind of are taking in and amplifying everyone else's emotions. So I would say I'm going to use you as an example. Obviously, take it if it feels good, let it go if it doesn't.
Yeah.
You are somebody who's very emotionally impactful. Like you're meant to have like pretty powerful, intense moods, and it's the source of a lot of your creativity, I would guess. And so I would say a big lesson in your design is not to try to prolong the highs or get out of the lows, but feel where you are and let them keep moving because they are always moving. And so, but also to realize your impact, so if you're on an emotional high, probably an amazing time to be out in the world, being with people. And when you're on a low, like probably a really good time to kind of hermit and be in your own energy and kind of let things move and like let the melancholic time be kind of a rich time. So I would say in terms of like how I would say you, and again, in my design too, processing emotions is one, just letting them move, like not trying to explain them, not trying to make sense of them, but just like knowing that like we are on an emotional wave, it is always moving. Like our job is to like let it moving and not try to like restrict it or hold it back.
Oh
How
yeah.
does that feel for you?
Oh yeah, moving the emotions, riding the waves, and just letting them come. Because in those moments of not being in the high, feeling maybe more melancholic, it's such a great word. That is that is where I find inspiration, I find creativity in the like moving out of it. It's so
Totally.
interesting every time. And then next thing I'm just like, wow, I want to share this thing, or I've had this download, or this piece of wisdom has just come through and I need to share it. So that's
Exactly.
totally there. But
Exactly.
are you saying that we don't all ride those emotional waves, or we don't all experience highs and lows in our lives?
Not as consistently as people like you and I might. So there are some people that have what we call an undefined emotional center, where they are incredibly empathic, so much so that like you're feeling a thing and then they're like, oh my God, I'm feeling your thing so much. And so like so they can have their own waves, absolutely, but they can like really get lost in feelings that are not their own very, very easily. And so I would say in terms of regulation for them, like a big lesson for them is like when they start to feel a thing, just to like actually probably take physical space to kind of leave the room and just ask themselves, like, is this really mine? Because it's like often they're just amplifying stuff that's not their own. And so my partner has this, and I have what we just talked about. And so, like, when I'm feeling a thing, he can be like, oh, wow, Erin's like really going through a wave. Like, I'm actually going to give her space because I don't want to personalize this. Like, this is not about me. And so, like, that's been our lesson is he's got to just disconnect because he's got to kind of be in his own energy because his default is like neutral and calm. And so I think for these people, the biggest lessons are just like emotional boundaries. If you feel emotionally overwhelmed, just take space and ask yourself, is it mine or is it not? And know that your job is not to fix anyone else's emotions, to kind of like not make sense of them, but just to kind of like let people move through their things, but to not get lost in things that are not your own. So for them, I think the real focus is just like a very healthy detachment and a very healthy awareness of what's theirs and what's not.
Yeah, which I can imagine being really useful in a relationship context, like you just said. And
Oh yeah.
I wonder how many arguments and fights
Oh
happen
yeah.
based on not
Yeah.
understanding this about each other.
So many. I can't tell you how many couples I talked to this about this dynamic specifically. It's just like, and again, you can see how like it could get really complicated where it's like the person that's really impactful, they kind of take on their emotions, they try to get that person to explain it, and like just no one's giving each other what they need, like not the space, not the kind of space to feel. So it's just so I feel like understanding our partner's designs, our colleagues' designs, our kids' designs is so useful because we stop taking so much personally and we just have a much greater awareness of like what's actually happening when we come together and how to kind of work with that dynamic and not kind of get lost in it.
Yeah, so beautiful. Oh my gosh. I am just falling in love with human design with you, Erin. You describe it so wonderfully. Now, you've mentioned a couple of times a few of the things you have on offer and where people can find you, but would you give us a little rehash again? Where can people find you if they're just like obsessed with this and want to know more?
Yeah, so definitely start by looking for your chart at humandesignblueprint.com. I share a lot on Instagram, like I said, both at Erin Claire Jones and Human Design Blueprint. If you'd like to dive into your design, the best place with me is something called the Blueprint book, which I mentioned, which is basically a 55 plus page guide all about your unique design. So it goes into all those pieces we talked about today, your type, your authority, your channels, those centers, the definition, the profile. It really is just like it's your operating manual, and it's really my intention is never to share things in very jargony ways, but just to help you know how to use your unique design to find more flow in your life. um we're going to do a discount code. Do you have a word that you like to use?
Oh, let's go with reset.
Reset is the discount code, and that's at humandesignblueprint.com. And then I also offer a course. We're in the midst of a live round right now, and we'll be, which people can still join, but we'll also be launching a new version of it in, I don't know when, but soon. And that's if you really want to kind of study and dive deep into all things human design. And then I also have a membership, but that's more if you're a reader and want to go deeper in that way.
I wonder how many people are listening. Like, I'm sure there's that little, like, small percentage that are hearing this for the first time, or maybe just like going deeper on it. And it's that same moment, like that conversation you had in
Totally.
university. Yeah. And they're like sparking up, like, oh my God, what is this thing? I have to know more. It's totally going to happen. At least someone listening to this.
It is, and it's so fun. And like it's so fun because I remember even like some of the first people that I did readings for back in, 2016, 2015, like then I just watched them all become readers, because they were so early and they just like fell in love with it. So it's so fun to watch that journey. And I think that if you're listening and you really resonate, just trust that. I think I've had some people take my course and study with me, and I'm obviously not the teacher for everyone, but like that's just like they have no idea where they're taking it. They're just like, I want to understand my family, and then they like end up doing readings and building a business around it. So it's just really cool to kind of watch those like beautiful paths just take root.
So impactful for people's lives. Thank you so much for joining me, Erin. I want to give you a like high five from my part of the world to yours, and to peaking in our prime in our 50s. That's awesome.
I know. What a thing to look forward to. Yes.
I'm so excited to see what Georgie at 50 will be and Erin at 50 will be. That's really cool. You enjoy the rest of your day. Good luck with the whole snow piling
Situation.
up scenario. Yes. And
Thank you.
I am so happy that you joined us and shared all of your wisdom. That's so, so awesome. And we're really lucky to have had you.
Thank you so much for having me. Have such a beautiful evening and so nice to connect.
Thank you.
I am so thrilled to announce my new book, The Anxiety Reset Method, is now available in bookstores across Australia. It's on booktopia.com and Book Depository if you're international. This book will help you create the resilience you need to thrive and keep that anxious mind in check. Broken down into weekly attainable goals, the Anxiety Reset Method will take you on a journey to show you that you really can master that anxious mind. Thank you for listening. We have reached the end of this episode. If you enjoy this podcast and you find it helpful, I would really appreciate it if you would hit subscribe or share this episode on your Instagram stories, and make sure you tag @Georgie the Naturopath. But that is all for today. Please be kind to yourselves. Know that you are enough and you are exactly where you need to be.